Stop playing nice. Start playing smart. Welcome to the laboratory of social pathology. Before we begin, internalize one truth. The world you see is not a community of equals, but a complex, hierarchical ecosystem. Your belief in justice, kindness, and fair play is not a virtue. It is a systemic error embedded in your firmware by those who want you to remain an obedient resource. While you strive to be good, social predators use your predictability as a roadmap for your destruction. You are not a subject. You are a variable in their equation of power. Your reluctance to play dirty does not make you a saint. It makes you defenseless. I am not here to teach you morality. I am here to dissect the mechanisms of control and teach you to see the blades beneath the velvet gloves. Let us begin the autopsy. Chapter 1. The Effect of Imaginary Security. Death through Politeness 1. The Encounter Phase. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of the London skyscraper, The Shard, was drowning in sterile silence. Arthur Miller, a senior analyst with an impeccable reputation and a habit of apologizing for every breath, sat opposite Julian Vane, a man whose gaze resembled the cold steel of a scalpel. Arthur laid out the report. His hands were trembling slightly, a classic release of adrenaline that he tried to suppress with a fake smile. I have prepared all the data, Julian. I worked overtime to ensure that everything is perfect. I hope this helps the team. Thought, please tell me I did a good job. Confirm my worth. Give me a dose of dopamine so I can sleep peacefully. Julian did not look at the papers. He looked at Arthur. Seconds stretched. 10, 15, 20. In the silence, only the faint hum of the air conditioner was audible, which seemed deafening to Arthur. His brain began to frantically fill the vacuum. If there are questions regarding the chart on page 5, I can explain. There was a small error in the calculations of the marketing department, but I corrected it. Arthur began to chatter, his voice rising half a tone higher. Thought, why is he silent? Did I do something wrong? I must say something else to diffuse the tension. Julian slowly tilted his head. The corner of his lip twitched upward, almost imperceptibly. It was not a smile. It was the grin of a biologist observing the agony of a laboratory mouse. Arthur. Julian's voice was low, almost a whisper, which caused Arthur to instinctively lean forward, violating his own boundaries. Why are you trying so desperately to make me like you? Your report is garbage, but your reaction, it is priceless. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. What happened to Arthur is cognitive suppression through an information vacuum. In social psychology, silence is a powerful tool of dominance. When a predator like Julian deliberately withholds feedback, the victim's brain, programmed for social cooperation, perceives this as a threat of expulsion from the tribe. Neurochemistry. At this moment, Arthur's amygdala sends an alarm signal. Cortisol levels skyrocket. To reduce stress, Arthur's brain attempts to regain control by producing a flood of unnecessary information. He literally leaks his positions, admitting mistakes, even those of others, simply to break the unbearable silence. Mechanism of attack. Julian uses Arthur's false vulnerability against him. Arthur's politeness is his papier-mâché armor. He is playing nice, hoping for reciprocity. However, in behavioral biology, this is called a submission signal. Arthur is exposing his throat, hoping he will not be bitten. A predator always bites. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Recall the famous experiment by Solomon Asch, 1951. Regarding conformity, a subject was asked to compare the length of lines. All other participants were actors and deliberately gave the wrong answer. The result was frightening. More than 75% of participants agreed with the obviously false opinion of the majority at least once, simply to avoid standing out or entering into conflict. Arthur is a modern product of this experiment. His politeness is the fear of social alienation. He is ready to admit his work is garbage if an influential figure simply remains silent for a sufficient amount of time. He is psychologically castrated by his own need for approval. In medicine, there is a term called learned helplessness. Martin Seligman. If a subject is shocked with electricity for a long time without the possibility of escape, they will stop trying to flee even when the door opens. Arthur has trained himself for years to play fair in a system that knows no honor. Now he sits in an open cage and waits for the blow. 4. The counter-strike phase. If Arthur wanted to survive, he should have applied the principle of radical pragmatism. Strategic decision mirrors silence. At the moment Julian became silent, Arthur should have. One leaned back in his chair, occupying more space, reducing cortisol levels through a power pose. 2. Withstood the pause while looking Julian directly at the bridge of his nose. This is perceived by the brain as a challenge rather than aggression. 3. Take in a sip of water, slowly. Lesson number 1. The one who is the first to break the silence is the first to surrender their positions. Never fill a pause with excuses. Silence is a space of power. Allow the opponent to drown in their own vacuum. If you are told that your work is garbage, do not argue. Ask in an icy tone, which specific metrics do not meet your expectations, Julian? Shift the emotional attack into the plane of dry logic. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The air in the office smells of ozone and expensive antiseptic. The glass walls reflect the gray London sky, turning the city into an endless labyrinth of concrete and steel. There is no room for warmth here, only cold calculation. Do you hear the Patek Philippe watch ticking on Julian's wrist? Each tick is a second of your slipping autonomy. The walls press in. The chair seems too soft, sucking you into a swamp of submission. You either take the knife or you become dinner. We continue the autopsy. If the first chapter was devoted to social pressure through silence, the second will touch the foundation of your self, your perception of reality. When a predator cannot break your will by force, they make you doubt what you see, hear, and remember. Welcome to the zone of personality disintegration. Chapter 2. The architecture of doubt. The art of destroying reality. The encounter phase. The rain outside the penthouse window in the Upper East Side turned the lights of New York into blurred neon spots. Inside, everything was sterile. White marble, steel, the scent of expensive perfume, and the faint aroma of freshly ground coffee. Elena Moore, a brilliant lawyer whose confidence in court bordered on arrogance, stood in the middle of the kitchen. In her hands was an empty envelope. "Julian," she called out, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Where are the documents for the Sterling case? I placed them here on the granite counter exactly 10 minutes ago." Julian Vane stepped out of the shadows of the hallway. He wore a perfectly pressed dark blue suit, even at 1 o'clock in the morning. He slowly approached her, closing the distance to a dangerous minimum. His presence physically displaced her from the space. "Elena, you are doing it again." His voice was soft, almost caring, which was more frightening than a shout. "You did not leave them here. We discussed this in the car. You said that you forgot them at the office because of exhaustion. Do you remember? Elena froze. Thought, in the car, I remember carrying them in my hands. I distinctly remember the cold paper. No, he speaks so confidently. Perhaps I really am losing my mind from lack of sleep. He loves me. Why would he lie? No, Julian, I am certain, she faltered. Julian slowly raised his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. His fingers were cold. Your memory is beginning to fail you, darling. This is the third time this week. First the keys, then the call to the client, now this. Perhaps you should take a vacation. Your brain is simply shutting down. You are becoming unstable. He looked into her eyes without blinking. Elena felt as if the floor were slipping from beneath her feet. Her logical defense, built over years, crumbled before this calm, objective statement. Thought, if I cannot trust my memory, what do I have to lean on? He is my only connection to reality now. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. What we are observing is classic gaslighting in its highest form. However, let us dissect the mechanics of the process deeper than popular magazines do. Neurobiology of disorientation. When Julian denies a fact that is obvious to Elena, cognitive dissonance arises in her brain. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic, tries to reconcile two contradictory pieces of data. I saw the papers, and the person I trust says I did not see them. The cortisol loop. A state of chronic self-doubt causes a constant release of cortisol. This suppresses the function of the hippocampus, the center of memory formation. The irony is that under the influence of gaslighting, memory actually begins to function worse. Julian is not just lying, he is physically rewiring her brain, making her incapable of resistance. Ethology of dominance. Julian uses the tactic of the caring aggressor. He seizes the role of the guardian of truth. In biology, this resembles the behavior of a dominant individual who controls the herd's access to resources. In this case, the resource is reality itself. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to the fundamental research of Elizabeth Loftus on the creation of false memories. In one of her famous experiments, the Lost in the Mall method, subjects were told 3 real stories from their childhood and 1 fabricated story about how they were lost in a shopping mall. After some time, 25% of participants not only remembered this fictional incident, but also began to describe it in minute detail. The color of the security guard's uniform, their feelings, and the smells. The brain is not a video camera. It is a reconstructor. Julian knows this. He inserts broken pixels into Elena's memory, knowing that over time her brain will complete the picture of his correctness. He uses her own imagination as a weapon against her sanity. Elena is an ideal victim because she is used to relying on her intellect. And it is precisely the intellect that is easiest to deceive by offering it a more logical version of events. 4. The counter-strike phase. Elena makes a critical error. She tries to argue based on feelings. In the world of cold calculation, feelings are noise. Lesson number 2. Reality is that which is recorded, not that which seems to be. To seize the initiative, Elena should have applied radical pragmatism. 1. External memory storage. In conditions of gaslighting, never rely on the brain. Record everything. Take photos with your phone. If Elena had taken a photo of the papers on the counter, a paranoid habit is a guarantee of survival. Julian would have had no room to maneuver. 2. Refusal to explain. As soon as you begin to prove your adequacy, you have already lost. Julian wants her to make excuses. 3. Cold counterattack. Instead of, "I remember," she should have said, "An interesting hypothesis, Julian. But let us check the security camera footage in the hallway." Even if there are no cameras, the very readiness to verify facts destroys his aura of omniscience. Strict rule. If someone systematically makes you doubt your memory, that person is not caring for you. They are digging up the foundation of your personality to build their own castle in that spot. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The room is too bright. This surgically white light cuts the eyes, leaving no room for shadows where the truth could hide. The coldness of the granite countertop penetrates through the fingers. Elena feels the taste of metal in her mouth. That is the smell of fear mixed with adrenaline. The quiet rustle of rain behind the glass seems like a mockery. The world outside is vast, but for Elena, it is narrowed to the size of this kitchen, where the only source of truth is a man with icy eyes and perfect hair. She feels her own body becoming foreign, heavy, and disobedient. This is the scent of capitulation. Social connections are not a safety net. They are a spider web. And if you are not the one weaving it, then you are the fly whose vibrations betray your location to the predator. In this chapter, we dissect one of the most effective tools for managing masses and individuals: triangulation. This is a method where direct contact between two people is disrupted by the introduction of a third element, creating tension, competition, and ultimately, complete dependence on the apex of the triangle. If you recognized yourself or your past reactions in the described patterns or character behaviors, place a plus in the comments. This is not a sign of weakness, but the first signal that your brain has begun the process of deconstructing old habits. Chapter 3. Triangulation. Power through controlled conflict. 1. The encounter phase. The hall of a private closed club in Mayfair. Heavy curtains the color of bull's blood, the scent of old wood and expensive tobacco. Sarah Miller, an operations director with 10 years of experience and absolute loyalty, waited for Julian Vane. She considered herself his right hand, the only person admitted to the inner circle. Julian did not enter alone. Beside him walked Mark Thorne, a young, ambitious analyst whose suit cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. "Sarah, dear," Julian barely touched her shoulder, but his gaze was directed at Mark. "Meet Mark. He has prepared a strategy for the acquisition of Ethelgard. It is..." Julian paused, savoring the moment. "Fresh. Exactly what we were missing. Your reports lately have become a bit predictable." Thought. "Look, Sarah, you are replaceable. Your loyalty is a liability, not an asset. Fight for my attention or disappear." Sarah felt a sting in her chest. Her pupils narrowed, a reaction to a sudden threat to her status. "But Julian, I have handled this sector for 3 years," she began, trying to protect her territory. Thought, who is this pup? Why is he praising him in front of me? I must prove that I'm better. "Exactly, Sarah. 3 years. Your eye has become blurred." Julian smiled at Mark. "Mark, show Sarah your developments. I think she has something to learn from you. Although, perhaps it is time for you to hand this project over to more hungry hands." Mark replied to Sarah with a polite but empty gaze. An invisible wall of ice and hatred instantly arose between them. Julian stood in the center, enjoying how 2 of his best employees began to thrash in an invisible cage, trying to claw out the right to be Number 1. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Julian masterfully constructed a destructive triangle. In this configuration, he occupies the position of the arbitrator, the apex, while Sarah and Mark occupy the positions of competitors. Mechanism of attack. Triangulation strikes at the most ancient fear, the fear of exclusion from the group. When Julian compares Sarah with Mark to her disadvantage, he activates her social pain centers in the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, the same ones responsible for physical pain. Neurochemistry. Sarah's serotonin levels, the sense of status, drop, and her norepinephrine levels, readiness for attack or flight, rise. She enters a state of tunnel vision, where her only goal is to destroy Mark and regain Julian's favor. She stops thinking about her own interests, begins to think only about how to please the master. Cognitive distortion. Sarah begins to see Mark as the cause of her misfortunes, completely ignoring the fact that Julian created the situation. This is a classic displacement of aggression. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to the experiments of Henri Tajfel regarding the minimal group paradigm, 1970. Tajfel proved that people can be made to hate each other and discriminate against outsiders based on absolutely random criteria, for example, a coin toss. In the experiment, subjects were divided into groups Klee and Kandinsky. Despite the fact that this division meant nothing, participants immediately began to give resources to their own group and disadvantage the other. Julian creates microgroups within his organization. He instills in Sarah that she is in the outdated group, while Mark is in the innovators group. Sarah, driven by the instinct of self-preservation, begins to play by his rules. She voluntarily agrees to overtime, to informing, to self-destruction, simply so that Tajfel's mechanism works in her favor. She does not understand that in a game where the rules are set by a predator, victory is only a stay of execution. 4. The counter-strike phase. Sarah loses because she is emotionally involved. She tries to outplay Mark, thereby confirming Julian's power. Lesson number 3. Exiting the triangle is possible only through the destruction of its foundations. If you are being triangulated, your task is to become a gray rock for the aggressor and an unexpected ally for the competitor. Strategic decision. 1. Refusal of competition. Instead of attacking Mark, Sarah should have publicly supported him. Mark, an excellent idea. I was just looking for a fresh perspective to complement my database. Let us combine efforts in my office. 2. Uniting the base. By uniting with Mark, she deprives Julian of his main resource, control through conflict. If two corners of the triangle begin to communicate directly without the participation of the apex, the triangle collapses. 3. Information vacuum for the aggressor. Stop giving Julian an emotional reaction. Your anger, your jealousy, and your fear are his fuel. Become boring. Become functional. Strict rule. Never fight for a place at the feet of someone who intentionally pits you against others. Your value is not determined by his praise. If you enter the struggle for his attention, you have already admitted to being a slave. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The club smells of wax and old leather. The sound of your footsteps on the soft carpet is absorbed by the space, leaving you in a cotton-like silence. You see Julian's reflection in the polished wood of the table. It is distorted and stretched, like in a funhouse mirror. The coldness of the metal on the doorknob burns your fingers. There are no friends here. There are only functions. You feel Julian's gaze scanning your face for micro-expressions of pain. Every muscle in your body must be immobile, like the mask of an ancient statue. If he sees that you are in pain, he will strike again. Breathe steadily. Your pulse is your only secret. Your compassion is not a sign of humanity. It is a hook by which you are pulled onto the shore to be butchered. While you empathize with the pain of another, your analytical centers shut down, giving way to the ancient instincts of a savior. In this chapter, we will analyze how predators use their weakness as the most deadly weapon. Chapter 4. The Compassion Trap. False Vulnerability as a Capture Tool 1. The Encounter Phase. A rainy evening in Boston. Sophie Reed, a successful financial consultant with a heightened sense of duty, was sitting in her cozy townhouse when there was a knock at the door. On the threshold stood Marcus Blackwood, her longtime acquaintance and former colleague. He looked crushed, a soaked coat, trembling hands, and reddened eyes. "Sophie, I have no one else to go to." His voice cracked. "I made an error in the calculations. If the board of directors finds out, my career is over. I have a family, a mortgage. I simply do not know what to do." Thought. "I chose you because your empathy is your Achilles heel. Now I will make you feel like my savior, and you yourself will offer me the help that will destroy your reputation." Sophie felt a familiar warmth spreading in her chest, a mixture of pity and pride that she was the one chosen. "Come in, Marcus. Quietly, everything can be fixed. What can I do?" Thought. "I am strong. I can help. If I do not help, I will be a bad person. My value is confirmed by his need for me." Marcus sat at the table, covering his face with his hands. "I need you to confirm the audit for the Vanguard deal," he whispered. "You know their assets. If you simply sign the interim report with your name, they will not check further. I just need to win 2 weeks to close the hole." Tension hung in the air. Sophie knew that this was a violation of protocol. However, the sight of the broken Marcus blocked her logic. She saw not documents, but a human tragedy. Thought. He is not a bad person. He just stumbled. If I refuse, I will be responsible for his downfall. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Marcus applied the strategy of artificial vulnerability. This is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation, based on the biological mechanism of the empathic response. Neurochemistry. When Sophie sees Marcus's suffering, her mirror neurons are activated, forcing her to feel his pain. Oxytocin, the hormone of trust and attachment, is released into the blood. The problem is that oxytocin reduces critical thinking. It makes the brain ignore red flags, the risk of breaking the law, focusing on strengthening the connection with the one asking for help. Role trap. Marcus pushed Sophie into the role of the hero savior from the Karpman drama triangle. As soon as Sophie accepts this role, she takes responsibility for his life. Her fear of becoming a persecutor, by refusing help, becomes stronger than the fear of professional consequences. Cognitive distortion. Halo effect of weakness. We tend to attribute high moral qualities to defenseless people. Sophie subconsciously believes, if he is suffering so much, then he is honest in his pain. A predator, however, imitates pain to deactivate your prefrontal cortex, your internal lie detector. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Recall the experiment by Dennis Reagan, 1971, regarding the rule of reciprocity. A subject worked in a pair with an actor named Joe. In one case, Joe did the subject a small favor, bought a can of cola for 10 cents. In the other, he did nothing. Later, Joe asked the subject to buy lottery tickets from him at 25 cents each. The results are striking. Those who received the cola bought twice as many tickets, even if they did not like Joe. However, in the case of Marcus and Sophie, we see reverse reciprocity. Marcus gives Sophie trust and recognition of her significance. You are the only one who can help. This is a gift of psychological superiority for which Sophie is now forced to pay with her signature. Also, the identifiable victim effect, Jenny and Lowenstein, works here. People tend to spend huge resources on saving one specific person whose face they see, while ignoring systemic risks for thousands of others. Sophie sees Marcus, but she has become blind toward the shareholders and clients whom she is betraying. 4. The counter-strike phase. Sophie was on the verge of disaster. To survive, she needed to apply radical pragmatism, according to Nietzsche. Nietzsche despised pity, mitleid, considering it a weakness that only multiplies suffering in the world. Lesson number 4. Your compassion should not cost you your head. If someone comes to you with a problem that requires you to violate your principles or the law, act according to the algorithm. 1. Emotional sterilization. Say to yourself, this pain is not mine. I am observing a performance. Separate the personality from the problem. 2. Verification by price. Ask yourself, if this person were indifferent to me, would I agree to this? If the answer is no, it means you are being manipulated through feelings. 3. Cold refusal with an offer. Marcus, I sympathize with your situation, but I will not sign this report. I can recommend a good lawyer to you or help create a restructuring plan for your personal debts. Strict rule. Never allow someone else's fire to burn down your house. True strength is the ability to look into the eyes of a suffering person and say, no, if that yes will destroy your architecture of power. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The room smells of rain and the wet wool of Marcus's coat. This scent presses down. It fills the lungs, making Sophie feel trapped. The light of the lamp falls on the papers. They seem unnaturally white, like bones. In the silence, Marcus's intermittent breathing is audible. It synchronizes with her pulse, trying to subordinate her rhythm to his own. The walls of the townhouse, which used to provide security, now seem cramped. The cold coffee in the cup is bitter, like the realization that you are being used. You must feel this coldness. If you do not feel it now, you will feel it in a cell or in a line for unemployment benefits. Choose. Dependence is not chains on the wrists. Real chains are forged inside the victim's skull. The most effective way to subordinate a person is not to intimidate them, but to become their only source of dopamine. When you control another person's reward system, you control their life. In this chapter, we will analyze the mechanics of creating an addiction that will make anyone follow you like a shadow follows a light source. Chapter 5. The Alchemy of Addiction. Creating an Emotional Vacuum 1. The Encounter Phase, Evening London, a private gallery in Mayfair. Chloe Sterling, a sought-after interior designer used to attention and flattery, stood by the window with a glass of champagne. She felt like the queen of the evening until she noticed Julian Vane. Julian was not looking at the paintings. He was not looking at her. He was talking to someone else. His laughter was quiet but deep. Chloe, used to men revolving around her, felt a strange sting, a deficit of attention. She approached him herself. Julian, I did not see you at the opening of my last exhibition. Thought, confirm that you noticed my absence. Say that you are sorry. Give me a dose of recognition. Julian slowly turned. His gaze slid over her as if she were a piece of furniture and lingered for a moment on her lips. Chloe, your work, it is curious, but there is too much desire to please everyone at once in it. That makes it cheap. His voice was devoid of aggression. He was simply stating a fact. Thought, I just struck your ego. Now I am the only one whose approval matters because it is the hardest to obtain. Chloe gasped. Her face flushed, a rush of blood caused by cortisol shock. All evening she tried to accidentally be near him, seeking even one approving glance. And when an hour later he approached and whispered, "However, your choice of colors in this hall is impeccable." She felt such a powerful rush of euphoria that her hands shook. She was already on the hook. She began to play the game of earn Julian's love, not realizing that the rules of the game changed every second according to his will. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Julian uses the most powerful technique in the arsenal of psychological dominance, intermittent reinforcement. Mechanics of attack. Unlike constant reward, which quickly causes habituation and a loss of value, intermittent reinforcement works on unpredictability. Julian gives Chloe a reward, praise, randomly. This turns her brain into the brain of a compulsive gambler at a slot machine. Neurochemistry of addiction. Every time Julian is cold, Chloe's brain enters a state of dopamine hunger. Her ventral tegmental area, VTA, and nucleus accumbens begin to work at their limit, demanding a dose. When he finally praises her, a powerful release of dopamine occurs. This peak is so strong that the brain remembers Julian as a source of survival. Biology of dependence. In nature, the unpredictability of a resource forces an individual to focus on it to the point of complete obsession. Chloe stops seeing other men and other goals. Her entire world narrows down to one variable: Julian's mood. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to B.F. Skinner and his experiments with the Skinner box. He placed pigeons in cages where they could receive grain by pressing a lever. One in the first group, grain was provided with every press. The pigeons quickly ate their fill and lost interest. 2, in the second group, grain was provided randomly. The result was shocking. The pigeons from the second group continued to press the lever frantically, even when the supply of grain stopped entirely. They became dependent on the very possibility of a reward. Julian turned Chloe into such a Skinner pigeon. Her intellect, her status, her will, all of this yields to a primitive biological program of reward-seeking. She is not in love with Julian. She is in love with the dopamine peak that he gives her drop by drop. 4. The counter-strike phase. Chloe will become a slave if she does not understand that her feelings are a chemical hallucination. According to Nietzsche, this is the path of slave morality, where a person seeks an external master to fill an internal void. Lesson number 5. Your autonomy ends where someone else's monopoly on your dopamine begins. To destroy this connection, it is necessary to apply radical pragmatism. 1. Desacralization of the source. Stop looking at Julian as special. Say to yourself, this is simply a mechanism for issuing random signals. He is no different from a slot machine. 2. Diversification of sources. Dependence arises where there are no alternatives. Chloe should have immediately shifted her attention to other people, projects, and physical activity, to any other sources of dopamine to reduce Julian's significance. 3. Refusal of the reward. The strongest blow to a manipulator is the absence of a reaction to their praise. When Julian finally praised Chloe, she should have yawned and said, "I am glad you noticed the obvious. Now excuse me, I am expected elsewhere." Strict rule, if to power. Take it back before it is two to power. Take it back before it is too late. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The gallery smells of fresh paint and expensive perfume, which feels suffocating. The bubbles of champagne in your glass burst with a quiet, barely audible hiss, resembling a whisper. You feel your back is tense, as every muscle waits for a sign from the person standing at the other end of the hall. The spotlight hits your eyes, turning everything around into a theatrical stage. You are an actress who has forgotten her lines and is desperately searching for a prompter. Your palms are damp. The coldness of the glass in your hand is the only thing connecting you to reality. But this is a false reality. The real reality is the cold calculation of the one who stands in the shadow and observes your fall without moving a finger. Most people lie to hide their intentions. This makes them predictable. A predator, however, uses the truth as a battering ram that destroys the walls of psychological defense. When you admit to something that others try to hide, you seem real, sincere, and safe. This is the greatest lie of all possible lies. We move to the section where the truth becomes the sharpest blade in your arsenal. Chapter 6. Radical Honesty. Truth as a way to disarm one. The encounter phase. A private office in an old New England mansion. The walls are lined with books in leather bindings. It smells of old paper, expensive bourbon, and cold ash. Olivia Grant, an ambitious political strategist, sat in a deep armchair opposite Victor Thorne. Victor was a man whose influence required no official titles. Olivia came to him to propose an alliance, expecting verbal fencing, omissions, and political games. She prepared 3 layers of defense and 5 variants of lies. "Victor, I am here to discuss our common interests in the upcoming campaign," she began. But he interrupted her with a gesture of his hand. "Olivia, let us not waste time." Victor's voice was dry and steady. "You are here because your previous sponsor leaked your accounts, and you need a new cover. You plan to use my connections to whitewash yourself, and then, in 6 months, set me up to take my place on the committee." Olivia froze. Her heart skipped a beat. Thought, he knows everything. This is the end. My defenses are useless. He sees right through me. Why is he speaking about this so directly? Victor took a sip of whiskey and looked into her eyes with chilling calmness. "And do you know what? I like it. I need your greed and your lack of principles. I will help you because at this moment, your desire to survive makes you my ideal tool. I am honest with you. I will use you as long as you are useful, and you will use me. Let us sign this contract with a full understanding that we are both scoundrels." Olivia felt a strange relief. Her defense collapsed not under the blow of a lie, but under the weight of the truth. She felt a sudden, almost intimate trust toward Victor. Thought, he is the only one who does not lie to me. With him, I can be myself. This is the most honest deal of my life. She did not realize that she had just voluntarily entered a cage, the keys to which he showed her, but did not give. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Victor applied the strategy of radical honesty as a method of paralysis. Most social interactions are built on a social contract of politeness, where everyone lies and everyone knows that everyone lies. By destroying this contract, Victor seizes control over reality. Shock effect. A direct admission of negative intentions. "I will use you. causes cognitive paralysis in the victim. Olivia's brain is used to defending against hidden threats. When the threat becomes explicit, the defense system fails. False intimacy. In psychology, there is a phenomenon. When someone reveals their shadow side to us, we subconsciously perceive this as the ultimate act of trust. Olivia mistakes Victor's strategic admission for sincerity. This creates an illusion of safety. She thinks, since he admitted to the bad things, he has no reason to lie about the rest. Neurochemistry. At the moment of Victor's admission, Olivia experiences a sharp spike in norepinephrine from the fear of exposure, which is immediately replaced by release of oxytocin due to the partner's honesty. This chemical cocktail makes her suggestible. She no longer analyzes the terms of the deal. She analyzes the unique connection with Victor. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to the concept of the pratfall effect, studied by social psychologist Elliot Aronson in 1966. In his experiment, subjects listened to a recording of an interview with two candidates for a quiz. One was extremely competent, the other was mediocre. Aronson discovered that if a competent candidate made a small blunder, for example, spilled coffee on themselves, their attractiveness and trust index increased sharply. People subconsciously seek flaws in perfection to feel safe. Victor uses this effect, but in a dark version. He does not spill coffee. He spills his dark truth. By admitting to cynicism, he becomes an honest professional in Olivia's eyes. He uses her need for authenticity to hide the scale of his game. His honesty is merely a facade behind which even deeper and more dangerous levels of manipulation are hidden, which he, of course, will never reveal. 4. The counterstrike phase. Olivia was consumed by Victor's truth and stopped seeing the facts. To survive in such a situation, one must follow the Nietzschean principle of suspicion. Nietzsche taught that behind every truth stands a will to power. Lesson number 6. The radical honesty of an enemy is their most effective disguise. If someone suddenly shows you their cards, follow the algorithm. One, search for hidden gain. Ask yourself, what benefit does he receive from me believing he is honest? If he admitted to stealing $1 million, it means he plans to steal $1 billion. 2. Ignoring the tone. Do not allow the sincerity and intimacy of the moment to influence your decision. Shift the conversation back to dry numbers and contract clauses. 3. Mirror truth. Respond in kind, but keep the main secret. Victor, I appreciate your cynicism. It simplifies the work. Let us discuss the termination clause. Strict rule. When you are told, I will be perfectly honest with you, you are actually being told, now I will administer anesthesia so you do not twitch while I operate on you. Never relax your muscles when a manipulator removes their mask. Beneath it, there is always a second, even thicker one. 5. The sensory immersion phase. It becomes colder in the office. The coldness does not come from the air conditioner, but from the realization that you are being dissected alive. You feel the rough surface of the leather chair. It seems too deep, making it difficult to stand up quickly. The light of the desk lamp highlights only Victor's hands. Calm, motionless, as if carved from bone. The rest of the world, beyond this circle of light, has ceased to exist. There is only this voice, monotonous and truthful, like a sentence. You inhale the smell of old dust and realize illusions die here. But freedom is not born in their place. In their place is born submission to the one who had the courage to call evil by its real name. You have passed through the circles of social hell. Silence, doubt, triangulation, pity, dependence, and false honesty. Now the time has come to assemble these shards into a blade. The final principle is not just a tactic. It is a state of being. It is the moment when you stop playing games and become the game itself. Welcome to the finale. There is no room for students here. This is where shadows are born that manage the puppeteers. Chapter 7. The Will to Power. Becoming the architect of another's fate 1. The Encounter Phase, Tokyo. The 54th floor of the Park Hyatt Hotel. Behind the panoramic windows, snow fell soundlessly, covering the neon chaos of the city in a cold shroud. Inside the room, absolute minimalism reigned. Black wood, glass, and emptiness. Thomas Wright, a young lion of the hedge fund industry, stood by the window, clutching a glass of whiskey. He felt triumph. Over the last 6 months, he had masterfully used all the techniques he had learned. He pushed out competitors, created a network of dependent agents, and even deceived his mentor. He turned to Julian Vane, who sat motionless in a chair in the shadows. I did it, Julian. The entire board of directors now votes exactly the way I need. I have intercepted your supply channels. I defeated you at your own game. Thomas made a wide gesture with his hand, splashing drops of liquid onto the carpet. Thought, look at me. Admit that I am stronger now. I have waited for this moment for years, to see your defeat. Julian remained silent. His face remained in the shadow, and only dim light reflected in his motionless eyes. The silence lasted a minute. 2. Thomas began to feel his triumph turning into irritation, and then into a sticky coldness in the pit of his stomach. Thomas. Julian's voice was almost tender, devoid of any emotion. Do you truly believe that your victory is the result of your will? He slowly stood up, and his shadow on the wall seemed enormous, consuming the space. Every step of yours, every brilliant maneuver was embedded by me into your route a year ago. I needed someone ambitious enough and stupid enough to take on the dirty work of asset restructuring that carries the threat of prison. And you handled it brilliantly. Julian approached the table and placed a single sheet of paper before Thomas, an arrest warrant with an open date. You are not a player, Thomas. You are my most successful experiment. I did not fight you. I simply allowed you to believe that you were winning so that you would dig your own grave with greater enthusiasm. Thought, you are merely a function in my equation, and your function has just been fulfilled. Thomas felt the glass slip from his weakened fingers. Thought, this cannot be. I calculated everything. Every decision of mine was mine. Or was it not? 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Julian demonstrated the highest form of power, according to Nietzsche. Integration into the architecture of reality. While Thomas was engaged in the micromanagement of manipulations, Julian managed the very context in which Thomas made decisions. Neurochemistry of dominance. Julian has a perfect balance. A high level of testosterone. Confidence, strategic risk. With a minimal level of cortisol, stress. This allows him to maintain a cold brain when others succumb to emotions. Thomas, on the other hand, is in a state of the winner effect. Dopamine intoxication has blinded him, making his behavior predictable and easily managed. Mechanics of the shadow. This is the use of radical pragmatism. Julian does not waste energy on direct conflicts. He uses someone else's will to power as fuel for his goals. he does not suppress Thomas's ambitions. He channels them into the direction he needs. Cognitive trap, illusion of agency. Julian made Thomas believe that he was acting of his own will. In social psychology, this is considered the most perfect form of control. When the victim takes pride in their actions, which actually lead them to their doom in the interests of the puppeteer. 3. The psychological precedent. Phase. Recall the Stanford Prison Experiment by Philip Zimbardo, 1971. The most important conclusion of this study was not that people become cruel, but how quickly they accept roles imposed on them within a system. Students assigned as guards did not receive instructions to be sadists. The system itself, the uniform, the glasses, the rules, dictated their behavior. Julian is Zimbardo in the real world. He created a prison of corporate circumstances and appointed Thomas as a guard. Thomas thought he was exercising his will, but he was simply following a script written by the architecture of the situation. As soon as the role was played out, the architecture changed, leaving Thomas in a void. Individuality is a myth. Only roles exist, and those who distribute those roles. 4. The counter-strike phase. Thomas has no counter-strike. His game was lost before it even began. To avoid being in his place, you must internalize the final lesson. Lesson number 7. Do not fight within the system. Become the system. Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. To possess true power, you must yourself become that abyss, the invisible, all-encompassing background." Strategic rule. 1. Depersonalization of success. Never bet on your ego. If to achieve a goal you need to look like a loser, look like one. True power does not need applause. 2. Management through allowance. Allow your opponents to win in small things. Let them feel smart and dangerous. The more they believe in their uniqueness, the easier it is to direct them. 3. Creation of inevitability. Your strategy should be constructed so that any choice of the opponent leads to your win. If they go left, they fulfill part of your plan. If they go right, another part. Strict rule. Your goal is not to become the center of attention, but to become the center of dependence. Ensure that the world around you functions according to your laws, even if no one knows your name. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The room smells of sandalwood and absolute, icy calmness. The snow outside falls so thickly that it seems as if the hotel is floating in a white void, cut off from the rest of humanity. The sound of the broken glass on the carpet was muffled and insignificant. You feel how your body becomes heavy under Julian's gaze. The air has become dense, like lead. You look at your hands and do not recognize them. Now they are tools belonging to another person. In this room, there is no morality, no compassion, and no future for those who are weak. There is only cold calculation and a will that turns people into ash. Do you hear your own heartbeat? It sounds like a countdown. And when 0 arrives, not even a shadow will remain of you. Because the shadow now belongs to Julian. The tools are laid out. The autopsy is complete. Before you, there is no longer a fog of social norms and moral obligations. Now you see the world as it truly is. A vast, cold mechanism where the gears are lubricated by dopamine, fear, and the thirst for recognition. We have stripped the skin from reality, exposing the pulsing nodes of control. Your belief that you are an autonomous personality was your main weakness. You were a product of other people's manipulations, a biological script written by those who are not afraid to look into the abyss. However, today you received more than just knowledge. You received a scalpel. Remember, in this food chain, there is no neutral zone. You are either the one who designs the cage or the one who gnaws its bars, calling it freedom of choice. Your politeness from now on is merely camouflage. Your honesty is a trap. Your silence is a sentence. Sensory finale. The lamp over the operating table goes out. The metallic clang of the instruments fades, leaving you in absolute, ringing emptiness. It smells of ozone and frozen iron. You stand before a mirror in a dark hallway. Your reflection no longer seems familiar. Your gaze has become heavier. There is no longer a search for approval in it, only the cold calculation of probabilities. The world outside continues its usual rhythm. People hurry, apologize, hope, and fear. But you are no longer one of them. You are an observer. You are an interference in their system. You are a predator who has learned to smile in such a way that no one feels the approach of the steel. Tread carefully. Now that you know the rules, the game has truly begun. Amor fati. Love your fate and make it serve you. Knowledge of the mechanisms of the psyche is your primary freedom. Subscribe to explore the hidden facets of human behavior together. And be sure to write in the comments which psychological pattern or strategy we should dissect next time. Let us search for the truth together.